Imagine you take a patient's wearable data, right, and you turn it into this incredible life-saving longevity protocol.
Yeah, which is kind of the dream scenario for a lot of doctors right now.
Exactly, it's the dream. But then suddenly the Department of Justice is knocking on your clinic door with a $27,000 fine per claim,
Oh, yeah.
all because of some, structural technicality you didn't even realize you violated.
It happens so much faster than you might think. I mean, the line between being a cutting-edge medical pioneer and, well, the target of a federal investigation is remarkably thin right now.
It really is. So, welcome to this deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are likely the physician owner of an SMB clinic, a small to medium business clinic,
Right.
and you are basically standing right on the fault line of this massive paradigm shift in healthcare. The ground is moving incredibly fast.
Oh, it's a total earthquake right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
So today we are taking a pretty hefty stack of sources. We've got clinical reviews on AI and longevity, some intense legal trend reports on genetic testing fraud.
Which are wild, by the way.
Oh, absolutely wild. Plus, we're looking at strict insurance coverage policies from Capital Blue Cross and Optum. And finally, some rigorous compliance breakdowns for highly profitable cash pay services like NAD plus IV therapy.
Yeah, our mission here is to synthesize all of this data for you. We want to give you, the clinic owner, a really clear, actionable roadmap.
Right.
Because we need to separate the genuine scientific advancements from the internet hype, and critically, we have to map out these legal and insurance minefields.
Exactly. So you can safely capitalize on this boom without risking your medical license or, your business or your patient's safety.
Which is the most important part.
Right. So the clinical shift happening right now is just fascinating to me because the traditional doctor-patient dynamic is being completely upended.
Well, completely.
I mean, driven by wearables, continuous glucose monitors, AI health app, patients aren't just showing up when they feel sick anymore.
No, they're coming in with spreadsheets.
Yes. They walk into your clinic with troves of their own data, attempting what the literature actually calls patient-generated medicine.
Right. But we need to make a really critical distinction right out of the gate here. There is a huge difference between biohacking and genuine longevity medicine.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
It's paramount, especially for a clinician. I mean, biohacking gets all the flashy media attention, but fundamentally, it's DIY experimentation.
Like taking random supplements because a guy on the internet said to...
Exactly. A biohacker might use nootropics for a quick cognitive boost, or they might jump into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for recovery. But it is highly fragmented.
Right.
It focuses on short-term optimization, and crucially, it completely lacks systematic longitudinal data tracking.
So DIY biohacking is essentially throwing darts blindfolded.
That is a perfect analogy.
Like the patient might hit the board, they might feel a little better today, but they have absolutely no idea if they are actually extending their health span or if they're just, putting their system under a new, totally unmeasured type of stress.
Yeah, they're just guessing. But longevity medicine, by contrast, is like using a laser sight. It is deeply data-driven. It's evidence-based. It shifts the entire focus to tracking biological age through advanced diagnostics. We're talking about epigenetic clocks.
Right, the epigenetic clocks, which, for those who don't know, measure DNA methylation patterns, right?
Exactly. They look at how a patient's cells are actually aging compared to their chronological age. It involves monitoring things like fasting insulin, tracking neuroinflammation markers, and then using precision interventions to actively mitigate that aging-related decline.
And this naturally evolves into this broader concept outlined in our sources, extended personalized medicine.
Right.
We are moving way beyond just standard clinical scores or basic genetic panels. You, as the clinic owner, are now in this position to synthesize genomics with continuous data from wearables, the Internet of Things, environmental sensors.
Even social network behaviors, which is crazy to think about.
It's wild. You are trying to predict how a specific individual will respond to a specific treatment at a highly specific moment in their biological timeline.
Which highlights exactly why these patients desperately need you. I mean, a better informed patient is wonderful, sure.
Right.
But raw data without clinical context is actually quite dangerous. The clinical review in our stack really emphasizes this. Individual, patient-ordered analysis lacks the fundamental global vision that a trained physician provides.
Yeah, without your integrated analysis to sort of filter the noise, patients can easily misinterpret a data spike.
Oh, happens all the time.
Right. And then they make decisions that have inadequate or, frankly, damaging consequences.
Exactly. So let's look at how you might actually treat a patient once you have that global vision. because this is where the clinical strategy gets really, really interesting.
Let's do it.
Longevity medicine isn't solely relying on, newly synthesized billion-dollar blockbuster drugs. A huge part of this frontier relies on the strategic off-label use of older, well-established medications.
Right, and a prime example highlighted in our sources is low-dose naltrexone, LDN.
Yes.
Now, naltrexone was originally FDA approved at high doses, usually, around 50 milligrams?
Yeah, typically 50 milligrams.
Right, to treat opioid and alcohol dependence. It's a full opioid receptor antagonist.
But when you administer it at a microdose, and we're talking typically between 0.25 milligrams and 4.5 milligrams.
Wow, so a tiny fraction.
A tiny fraction. And when you do that, the pharmacological behavior completely flips. It creates this temporary partial blockade of those opioid receptors, which triggers a rebound effect.
A rebound effect.
Yeah, the body basically ramps up its own natural endorphin production.
Yeah.
But the truly revolutionary aspect for longevity medicine is how LDN influences microglial activity in the central nervous system.
Wait, okay, let's pause and unpack that for the clinic owners. I mean, they know microglia are essentially the resident macrophages, right? The immune cells of the brain and spinal cord. But how does a microdose of an opioid blocker actually change their behavior in a way that impacts aging? That seems like a leap.
It's fascinating. It all comes down to cellular receptors. So microglia have these receptors called toll-like receptor 4, TLR4.
Okay.
When microglia become chronically activated, whether that's from stress, environmental toxins, chronic infection, they bind to these TLR4 receptors and start pumping out inflammatory cytokines.
Ah, so that creates chronic neuroinflammation.
Bingo. There's a massive upstream driver of biological aging, cognitive decline, chronic fatigue, you name it. And low-dose naltrexone actually binds to and blocks that specific TLR4 receptor.
Oh, wow.
So instead of using, say, a broad-spectrum immunosuppressant or heavy steroid, you are essentially putting the brain's immune cells on a leash. You are regulating the neuroinflammation right at the source.
That is incredible. So you have these amazing clinical tools. You can map an epigenetic clock. You can analyze all this wearable data. And you can write an off-label script for LDN to subtly modulate neuroinflammation.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. But knowing what to prescribe is really only half the battle, because the moment you write that off-label script or try to implement these advanced genetic diagnostics, you trigger a chain reaction with the payers.
Oh, yes, you do.
You hit a massive administrative brick wall.
The friction between the reality of cutting-edge precision medicine and the, frankly, archaic structure of health insurance reimbursement. I mean, it is the biggest bottleneck in the industry right now.
So let's map out this payer maze, starting with that off-label LDN prescription. We looked at the Capital Blue Cross medical policy to see exactly how hard it is to get an off-label therapy covered. What is the actual mechanism behind their approval process?
Well, the mechanism is built on very rigid, documented precedent. According to Capital Blue Cross, simply prescribing a drug off-label just because you read a promising study.
That's not enough.
Not even close.
Yeah.
For coverage to even be considered, the drug must obviously be FDA approved for its original indication. Yeah. And there can be absolutely no contraindications for your specific patient.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the real hurdle is the justification. The off-label use must be explicitly supported by major recognized compendia.
Like the NCCN Drugs and Biologics Compendium.
Exactly. Or Thomson Micromedex. And if it isn't in those massive databases, you have to provide robust, peer-reviewed medical articles from major authoritative clinical journals, proving its efficacy for that specific condition.
And I mean, if that's the hurdle for a generic drug, it's child's play compared to genetic testing.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Looking at the legal trends reported by the law offices of Scott Glofsky, the denial rates for advanced genetic panels are just staggering.
They really are.
The payers frequently weaponize that classic not medically necessary denial, or they'll explicitly carve out exclusions in the patient's specific policy, or they just blanket label the entire test as experimental.
Or investigational, yeah. And it places this immense administrative burden on the SMB clinic. I mean, while the Affordable Care Act and recent regulations do provide legal avenues for patients to appeal these denials,
right,
it's often your front office staff spending hours and hours on the phone fighting those appeals.
Which is exhausting.
It is. So to try and standardize this chaos, we are seeing the introduction of systems like Optum's Detect C codes.
Now, I want to stop and clarify this because when a physician hears Z codes, their brain immediately goes to ICD-10 Z codes.
Naturally.
Right, those are the standard codes we use to categorize a healthcare encounter that isn't a disease like a patient coming in for a routine annual physical or a vaccination. So how are Optum's DTEC Z codes different mechanistically?
Well, they share a letter, but they serve entirely different functions. Like you said, ICD-10 Z codes classify the reason for a patient encounter.
Right.
Optum's DTEC Z codes, which are managed by Palmetto GBA within the DTEC Diagnostics Exchange, these are unique proprietary 5-character alphanumeric codes specifically designed to identify molecular diagnostic tests, MDX tests.
Okay.
Think of the genetic testing market over the last decade as basically the Wild West.
Total chaos.
Exactly. Insurers had thousands of labs billing for proprietary panels, and they had absolutely no idea which tests were scientifically valid and which were essentially junk science.
So the DX code is basically like TSA pre-check for your lab tests. It proves the identity and the safety of the test itself.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. The Z code represents a very rigorous technical assessment. It proves to the payer exactly what is being tested, the methodology used, and that the test analytically does exactly what it claims to do.
It establishes transparent billing.
Exactly. Transparent billing between the lab and the payer.
But wait, here is the massive catch. If a lab test goes through that incredibly rigorous process of getting a DEXZ code, proving its scientific validity, shouldn't insurance just cover it automatically?
You would think so.
Right. Why is there still such a massive canyon between a test being quality assured and your clinic actually getting paid for it?
Because TSA PreCheck gets you through security, but the airline still decides if you have a ticket to board the plane.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That is the crucial difference between test validity and medical necessity. A DHZ code proves the test is scientifically valid, but the insurance company's medical director still has to decide if performing that specific test on your specific patient is medically necessary to guide their immediate clinical treatment. Medicare, for instance, operates under the premise that they only pay for treatments of illness or injury. They generally do not pay for preventative screening unless Congress specifically mandates it.
Jeez.
So, even with a valid Z code, if the insurer determines that knowing a patient's genetic risk won't change the immediate medical management of their current symptoms, they will just deny the claim.
Wow. Let's just underline that for the clinic owners listening. You could offer a test that is scientifically flawless, but because it's preventative rather than reactive, it just gets denied.
Yep.
And as if that payer friction wasn't enough, our sources highlight a massive non-clinical hurdle, which is patient fear. The patients themselves are terrified of what the data might do to them.
This is a devastating catch-22, and it's clearly outlined in the Genome's Two People research regarding insurance discrimination. So in the United States, we have the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act.
Right.
GINA strictly prohibits health insurers and employers from discriminating against an individual based on their genetic data.
But the loophole in GINA is big enough to drive a truck through, because it does not protect against life insurance, disability insurance, or long-term care insurance discrimination.
Exactly, because those industries rely on underwriting risk pools based on future mortality and morbidity.
Makes sense from their perspective, but...
Right. And the Genome's Two People research highlights that this glaring loophole actively deters patients from participating in genomic research or clinical testing.
Because if a patient takes a predictive genetic test at your clinic and discovers, say, a marker for early onset Alzheimer's or Huntington's disease,
they legally could be denied long-term care insurance, or their family could face exorbitant, completely unaffordable life insurance premiums down the line.
Man, so you have a patient who might desperately want to optimize their health span. You have the tools to do it, but they are actively opting out of a test that could save their life simply to protect their family's financial future.
It creates a tremendous amount of friction in the consultation room.
I can imagine. So let's look at the cause and effect here. You are a clinic owner. You want to offer extended personalized medicine, but the insurance denials are constant, the documentation requirements are crushing your staff, and patients are super wary of getting things on their official medical record.
Right.
It becomes incredibly tempting to just bypass the system entirely, to just say, you know what? Forget the payers. I'm going strictly cash pay. I'll sell direct-to-consumer genetic panels. I'll set up a trendy NAD plus IV drip bar in the back room, and I'll just collect the cash.
And that exact pivot that transition to highly profitable, unsupervised cash-based services
Hmm.
driven by entrepreneurial zeal rather than rigorous compliance.
Yeah.
That is exactly how a well-meaning physician ends up with federal agents in their waiting room.
Okay, let's step into this compliance minefield then, because the legal trend reports from the American Health Law Association are not describing minor slaps on the wrist here.
No, they are not.
They are detailing multi-agency federal enforcement actions that absolutely destroy careers. Let's break down the genetic testing fraud first, because the scale of it is kind of difficult to comprehend.
The scale is astronomical. In one major coordinated enforcement action, the Department of Justice prosecuted 35 defendants associated with telemedicine companies and laboratories.
35.
Yes. And the charge: fraudulently billing Medicare over $2.1 billion in genetic testing costs.
Billion with a B.
With a B.
Okay, walk us through the mechanics of a scheme that massive. How does a physician even get roped into that?
It almost always starts with a marketer offering a quote-unquote turnkey revenue solution.
Ah, the magic turnkey solution.
Right. So the labs were paying illegal kickbacks and bribes to independent marketers. These marketers ran huge telemarketing networks that specifically targeted Medicare beneficiaries, convincing them they needed expensive cancer genomic testing.
Okay.
Then, the marketers would funnel these patients to fraudulent telemedicine companies. The telemedicine companies would then pay physicians, often just doctors, looking for a side hustle to consult with these patients.
But I'm guessing there was no real consultation.
Barely. There was no real doctor-patient relationship. The physician might have a 2-minute phone call with a patient they had never met, or sometimes no interaction at all. They would blindly sign off on the authorization for these expensive, medically unnecessary genetic panels.
Wow.
So the lab bills Medicare thousands of dollars. The marketer gets a cut, the telemedicine company gets a cut, and the doctor gets a consulting fee.
And when the federal government unwinds this, they bring out the heavy artillery.
Oh, absolutely.
If you own an SMB clinic, you really must understand the mechanisms of these federal statutes. Let's start with the False Claims Act, the FCA.
So, the False Claims Act is the government's primary weapon against healthcare fraud. It imposes massive liability on anyone who knowingly submits or causes the submission of a false claim to the government.
Right.
But the critical mechanism clinic owners need to understand here is implied false certification.
Yes, right, because a lot of doctors think, well, the lab test was actually performed, so the bill isn't fake.
Exactly. But under implied false certification, when you submit a claim to Medicare, you are legally implying that you complied with all underlying material conditions of payment, including anti-kickback statutes.
Ah,
So if you accepted an illegal kickback to order that test, the claim you submit for the test is considered legally false, even if the test itself was flawlessly executed.
and the penalties.
Draconian. Up to nearly $28,000 per false claim, plus triple the amount of the government's actual damages. A few dozen tests can literally bankrupt a practice.
It's just staggering. Then you have the Stark Law, which is the physician self-referral law, and this one is a strict liability statute, meaning your intent doesn't even matter.
That's right. Ignorance is no excuse.
If you refer a Medicare or Medicaid patient for a designated health service, which includes clinical laboratory services, to an entity with which you or an immediate family member have a financial relationship, you have violated the law.
Unless you fit into a very specific, narrow safe harbor.
Right. And if you don't, you are looking at civil penalties of up to $27,750 for each service provided.
And then we reach the Travel Act, which is just a fascinating piece of prosecutorial leverage.
I love this one. It's terrifying.
It really is. The Travel Act makes it a federal crime to use any facilities of interstate commerce to promote, manage, or carry on any unlawful activity, specifically including state bribery offenses.
This is the one that blows my mind. Explain how this takes a local state issue and turns it into a federal indictment.
Well, let's say a local lab rep offers you an arrangement that violates your state's commercial bribery laws, but maybe it doesn't trigger a federal healthcare statute because it's commercial insurance, not Medicare.
Okay, so it's a state issue.
Usually, yes. But if you discuss that illegal arrangement on your cell phone or send an email about it, or the lab mails you a check, the DOJ can use the Travel Act to charge you with a federal crime.
Wait, really?
Yep, because the cell phone network, the internet, and the U.S. Postal Service are considered facilities of interstate commerce.
So using your iPhone to text a lab rep about a shady referral fee, instantly federalizes the crime.
Instantly.
That is so sobering. Now, I can hear a clinic owner saying, okay, I don't touch Medicare and I don't do outside labs. I just do cash pay NAD plus IV drips in my clinic. I'm totally immune to federal fraud.
Good luck with that.
Right. But the state laws are waiting right there for you. Let's use California's IV therapy market as a case study, based on the breakdown by Holt Law.
California is the perfect case study. It's the epicenter of the longevity market, but it has arguably the strictest regulatory framework in the country. The foundational hurdle there is the Corporate Practice of Medicine Doctrine, or CPM.
Let's explain why CPOM exists. Because the whole point of the doctrine is to prevent a scenario where corporate profit motives override a physician's independent clinical judgment.
Exactly.
So California prohibits standard limited liability companies from practicing medicine or directly employing physicians to provide medical services.
Right.
If you want to offer IV therapy in California, your business cannot be a standard LLC owned by some tech entrepreneur. It must be structured as a professional medical corporation, and a licensed physician or a specific group of licensed healthcare professionals must own at least 51% of it.
Precisely. You cannot just be a business person who hires a medical director as a figurehead to rubber stamp treatments, which leads directly into the supervision and delegation issue.
This is a huge trap.
It's the exact mechanism where most modern IV bars step on a landmine.
Yeah.
Yes. Registered nurses and licensed vocational nurses possess the physical skill to insert a needle and administer an IV. But in California, IV hydration is classified as medical treatment. An RN cannot independently prescribe or initiate that treatment. They can only administer it under the direct supervision of a physician, a nurse practitioner, or a physician assistant.
Okay, let's role play this. So the mechanism is crystal clear. I'm a clinic owner. NAD plus drips are highly profitable.
Right.
I lease out a room in the front of my clinic. I hire an RN to run it purely for cash pay walk-ins, and I give her a binder of standard operating procedures. The binder says if a patient asks for the anti-aging NAD plus drip, administer 500 milligrams over 2 hours.
Okay, sounds common.
But I, the physician, am in the back seeing other patients. I never actually examine the IV walk-in. Am I basically committing the unlicensed practice of medicine?
In California, you are absolutely violating the Medical Practice Act. Those generic standing orders are legally insufficient. The good faith exam must be conducted by an authorized prescriber, you, the MD, or your NP or PA, for each individual patient before that IV is initiated. You have to evaluate their medical history, check their vital signs, assess their renal function to ensure they can even handle the fluid load, and determine if NAD plus is clinically appropriate for them.
So no generic binders.
No. Allowing an RN to administer a medical treatment without that prior good faith exam is a severe violation of supervision protocols.
And we haven't even touched the pharmacy board regulations. When your RN takes a vial of NAD plus or a mix of B vitamins and injects it into a saline bag, they aren't just, making a wellness cocktail.
Not legally, they aren't.
The California State Board of Pharmacy classifies that exact action as sterile compounding. It requires specialized training, specific hood environments, and stringent protocols to avoid introducing bacterial contamination directly into a patient's bloodstream.
And finally, your marketing has to align with reality. NAD plus is an incredibly promising molecule for cellular energy, but it is not FDA approved to cure chronic fatigue, treat neurodegenerative diseases, or reverse aging.
Right.
If your clinic's website makes definitive, disease-curing claims without rigorous, peer-reviewed clinical backing, you will draw the attention of the FTC and the state medical board.
Which you do not want.
Definitely not. And just so clinic owners are aware of the climate right now, the DOJ recently secured a massive budget increase to hire 120 new attorneys and 900 FBI agents specifically to track down pandemic and healthcare fraud.
Wow.
Yeah, they have the manpower to investigate these exact compliance failures.
So, bringing all these threads together, what is the ultimate takeaway for the physician owner listening right now?
The horizon for extended personalized medicine is phenomenal. You have unprecedented tools.
You really do. You can synthesize wearable data. You can utilize off-label therapies like LDN to modulate neuroinflammation at the cellular level. And you can offer scientifically tailored medicine that genuinely extends a patient's health span.
But realizing the potential requires an ironclad foundational compliance structure. You have to respect the underlying intent of doctrines like the corporate practice of medicine.
Absolutely.
You need to intimately understand the difference between test validity and medical necessity when dealing with Z-codes. And you must absolutely resist the temptation of easy kickbacks from labs or the allure of setting up an unsupervised, high-volume 4V room.
Because at the end of the day, your core value isn't just access to the therapy. I mean, in a world flooded with AI health apps, direct-to-consumer lab kits, and influencers telling patients how to biohack their biology, your clinic provides the one thing an app cannot.
The global clinical vision.
Exactly. You are the safeguard.
That human oversight is the actual product. You are the one who looks at the epigenetic clock, factors in the fasting insulin, contextualizes the wearable data, and translates that overwhelming wall of noise into a safe, medically sound strategy.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. As extended personalized medicine continues to evolve, our sources suggest we are going to see the rise of entirely new professional profiles.
Yeah, roles like medical data scientists, whose sole function is to decode the massive influx of our genomic and biometric data.
It is an inevitable evolution of the clinical team. So the question for you, the clinic owner, is this. As AI and algorithmic data analysis become exponentially more powerful, will the physician owner of the future eventually be reduced to just a medical director for an algorithm?
Just a human signature legally required to authorize the machine's diagnosis.
Right. Or will the sheer terrifying complexity of all this biological data make human intuition, clinical empathy, and the traditional face-to-face good faith exam the ultimate premium service?
It's the defining question of modern medicine right now. We may very well find that the more sophisticated our technology becomes, the more desperately patients crave the nuanced judgment of a human physician.
I think so too. In this incredibly complex, rapidly shifting frontier of longevity medicine, maybe your patients aren't actually looking for an algorithm to give them a perfectly clean binary printout.
Maybe not.
Maybe what they're really paying for is a guide they implicitly trust to help them navigate the waters safely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible for your patients, but build the compliance structure to protect your practice. We'll see you next time.